Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Play, Pause, Rewind. This is now our 33rd episode. Niles, how have you been since our last recording session?
All right. It's been a busy time for sure. And just very busy. I don't want to get too much into how I'm doing, but how about you doing? How are you?
I'm all right. I'm doing good. Also pretty busy, but yeah, we both made time this last weekend to go see the film we're going to talk about today. And that film is Everything Everywhere All at Once. Did I get it? Did I get the order right? Yes, I did.
Yes. Yeah, you did.
Yeah. And just, if you haven't seen this movie, leave, go watch it. Go in blind.
We don't want you.
Yeah. I mean, we don't want to ruin it for you. Like, we always do non-spoilers briefly, but I knew nothing about this other than the one trailer I saw, and I think it benefits from that. Even talking about the premise is kind of spoilery, so just go watch it. It's really good. You'll laugh, you'll cry. It's wonderful, and we don't want to ruin it for you. So, non-spoilers though for a couple minutes, and then we'll just dive right in. What were your general thoughts on Everything Everywhere All at Once?
I mean, I loved it. It's really hard to find a fault in this film. It's breathtaking. It's just beautiful. It's got life lessons in it. It's got lessons about parenthood, but then it's also got like these brilliant comedic moments. And just bizarre worlds. We can't get too much into it without getting into spoilers, but yeah, it's just I was in the same boat as you, Dylan. When we came into this film, I had watched the trailer briefly and I was like, I don't need any more. I'm going to see that. Like, I didn't want anything to be spoiled for me. I went into this blind, and I'm just so happy I did, because it's just such a fun experience. And I wish this movie was playing like everywhere, because we had to see this at like kind of like an art film place, I guess, rather than like your local AMC or whatever. And
right.
Yeah, it was just really great. What about you?
I love it. And it's super funny, but also super genuinely emotional. Like, the comedy never undercuts the drama or the tension of what's going on. It's more jokes than quips, I think, which is a good distinction. But yeah, it's a very genuine and heartfelt movie, I think. And it written and directed by Dan Kwan and Daniel Scheinert. Sorry. Collectively known as Daniels. You put that here. Do they work together frequently? Is that?
Yeah, that's my understanding. One of their most notable previous works was Swiss Army Man.
Oh, okay. The Daniel Radcliffe one, right?
Yeah, that Daniel Radcliffe one. And they've done, like, I was reading up on them before we started this podcast, and they've done like a lot of previous directing work together. A lot of it, like, not a lot of films, a lot of it was like music videos and stuff like that, but they're pretty like known well together. Like, that's why they're a lot of articles that I was seeing, they're referring to them as just Daniels together, because both their names start with Dan. So
but the movie stars Michelle Yeoh, and apologies on pronunciation, I meant to look that up beforehand but ran out of time. Michelle Yeoh, Stephanie Su, Ke Huy Quan, James Hong, Jamie Lee Curtis, Tally Metal, and Jenny Slate. I don't know if you know this, but Ke Huy Quan, the husband, is or was Short Round in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Indiana Jones's little kid sidekick.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
And,
wow.
Yeah, and just I found this out today listening to the Weekly Planet podcast. He hadn't acted in a long time because he didn't really see many opportunities for himself as an Asian man, which is something that is slowly being remedied, I guess. But apparently he saw Crazy Rich Asians and how successful that was, and was like, oh shit, I wish I had been around to be a part of that. And that was part of what got him back into acting, if I'm understanding that correctly. So that's kind of cool.
Cool.
But
Wow.
yeah, short round. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, that's insane. Like I wouldn't have expected to see short round from
No,
an Indiana Jones film from what was that, the 80s?
yeah. Well, that
even
was
earlier?
no. The first indie film was 1980, I think, and Temple of Doom was the second one. So I think
Okay,
it was
yeah.
like 83 or 84. But
Mhm.
yeah, story follows Michelle Yeoh's character Evelyn, who owns and runs a laundromat with her husband Waymond. And basically they're going to the IRS because they're being audited because they have a lot of business expenses. And yeah, so she's suddenly approached, and I'm just saying things that are in the trailer right now, so I'm
Yeah.
still treating this as non-spoilers. A alternate universe version of her husband comes to her and basically quickly explains what the multiverse ability is in the movie, and that she must stop an upcoming crisis that threatens the whole of reality. Yeah, and that's sort of the jumping off point for this, and how that comes to pass and what that crisis is. We'll get into in spoilers, but yeah, that's our jumping off point. It's a good time. It's played very comedically and dramatically at the same time. It works really well.
Yeah, and like all the articles that I was reading on this, like, I just tried to get as much information as I could on it.
Mm-hmm.
But they spent, like, the Daniels, they spent, like, I think um numerous years writing this film. I want to say 6 years, but I might be misconstruing that. But they like finished I think the first draft like in 20. Actually, I'm not even going to say because I'm mixing up my dates for sure.
Okay.
But they spent a lot of time just researching and writing this film,
Mm-hmm.
and it went through a lot of different iterations. There's some deleted scenes that I wish were added, and
Okay.
like there's this whole separate focus, like how the film kind of started, where like we're living in this universe right now where lots of multiverse narratives are being thrown at us
Mm-hmm.
right now with the MCU and all that other stuff. Like we're living in this time where this narrative is being really propped up and on its soapbox, and they really wanted to create a film that wasn't generic, that really kind of broke the boundaries of what a multiverse film is
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be, or narrative. And it's just amazing. Just I think this was such a masterpiece.
Yeah.
It's funny, it's emotional. She's going through a real life financial audit, and at the same time it feels like an existential audit of her life too.
Mm-hmm.
Bouncing around between the different universes, and it's just so beautiful too, because I feel like you can see so many influences from past movies and various like creative works, like The Matrix, 2001 A Space Odyssey too. Like
Mm-hmm.
that one's pretty on the nose. We'll talk about that
Yeah.
later too. But like you can also, I feel like you can see some like absurdist humor in this film too, like kind of like Kurt Vonnegut or like Douglas Adams, the guy who wrote Life, the Universe, and Everything.
Okay.
Which is 42. That's the answer. But I just, yeah, it's beautiful, and you can just see like how much thought went into each frame, each just scene of the film. It's just very, very well done.
I totally agree, and it balances tone really well, and it uses like we have Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness coming up, which I'm sure is going to be a super great movie. But the use of the multiverse in that, I am predicting, will be very much like, oh, we're going to different universes and we can see like, oh, different versions of people doing different things, or like different actors playing characters we're familiar with. And it's like a vehicle to experience fun alternate versions of characters. Whereas I think the multiverse in this is very much tied to the theme and about like it highlights the need to find meaning in life, and
Yes.
where meaning comes from, which we can discuss that more in spoilers because that is a big part of the plot as well. But yeah, it's using the multiverse story multiverse premise as a means to tell a very small and personal story. But
yeah, it absolutely is. And what it feels like optimistic nihilism, absurdism. You have those themes that you were talking about too, of learning to love the life you have. And I guess it's not technically like a Bildungsroman or like a coming of age tale, but it is about parenthood, and it's about self-acceptance and finding some meaning in life, just like you were saying. And it's if you haven't watched this film and you're listening to this podcast, I don't know why you
should be gone by now. We're over 10 minutes in, but it's also about recontextualizing what you have and gaining a better understanding of it. And that we'll talk about in spoilers as well. But lots of great slapstick fights, but also excellent fight choreography that is shot well. And just really overall great. And I kind of just want to go spoilers at this point so we can go for it. You ready?
Let's do it. Jump on in.
Cool. All right. So Evelyn at the start of the movie frantically flipping through thousands of receipts because the IRS is auditing their laundromat business, which is also failing. I think the introductory scenes paint a really good picture of where she is in her life. She's very focused on the business. She is so distracted and like stressed out about everything going on that she is missing things that are important in her life. Like Waymond is trying to surf force papers to her, and she's just like, not now. Her daughter needs to talk to her about introducing her girlfriend to the granddad. She's like, not now, gotta work, very busy. And it's just like she is missing all these details and positive things about her life because she's so like focused on the success of this business and living up to the expectations she has for herself. Great character introduction right there, I think.
Yeah, it's super quick, straight to the point, and it's very effective at story building the world that we're in right now. It's grounded in reality. We get a good jumping off point. Like, how much more grounded in reality can you get than the IRS? Like taxes, man.
Yeah, it really does. Like today is tax day as of recording. Yeah, but it's like, it is really like very out there premise, the multiverse, very down to earth premise, the IRS, put them together. That's
yeah.
That's the conflict of this movie.
Yeah, it's really effective at establishing the premise right from the get-go, and then we add on this extra element of the Alphaverse, which is the first universe in the multiverse that discovered that there were other universes and made first contact with those universes. And that's where they're in the IRS, and they're in the elevator going up, and then all of a sudden her husband switches to the alpha version of himself, and he explains the premise of the verse jumping, and then it just goes balls to the wall from there. She just gets thrown into a whole bunch of different like multiverse scenarios, and they just get weirder and weirder and weirder.
Yeah, but the also just the way they do the multiverse in this, it's not so much traveling to another universe as again we're going to see in Doctor Strange. It's more about like you kind of peek in to other universes and you occupy that body for a brief amount of time. Like you're not supposed to stay there, was how I understood it. And then while you're there, you absorb memories and abilities from that version of you, and then you hop back out. So and then the way it's introduced initially, it's like she has to proclaim her love for something. I didn't hear exactly, but then that triggers the alternate reality path where she ends up being like a kung fu master. And as it goes on, it's like you have to do something that will trigger that alternate life path so that you can absorb the abilities of that version of you, which leads to some great comedy of people just doing random shit.
Yeah.
At least random to us, but like when she drinks the whole bottle of the soda, in my mind, I was thinking like, oh, there was probably a point in her life where she thought about drinking an entire bottle of soda for no reason, and then that would have set her on a different life trajectory. But she's also just grasping at straws for whatever ability she can muster in that moment. It's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that fight too is just hilarious. I think it's with like Jenny Slate, and she's like kicking her little dog around, like
she's using her dog like a fucking morning star.
Yeah, it's so absurd,
so terrible. And also it keeps like, I think at one point when the dog gets thrown in the fridge, like regular Jenny Slate reappears for a moment. She's like, ah, and then the other one takes over again.
She's like, no, my dog, I love you.
I hope the dog ended up okay. We never see what happens to it. It gets thrown off and we never see it again.
In my head, he's living his best life in another universe somewhere.
I hope so.
And I'm okay with that.
I really hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, the verse jumping is, I think, it's a little confusing. To me. You see, like, it was, I think we talked about this after the movie too, and we had we got a beer after the movie, and to me it was kind of reminiscent of the totems from Inception. Everyone's got their special totem to remind them they're in the original universe. You got the top that's spinning, or the dice that always lands on one side, or something like that. To me, that's kind of the association I had with a lot of those behaviors that people were doing. But at the same time, because like at certain points it felt like people were, they were like, get into your verse state or whatever, and some woman started singing Santa Maria, and it's like, you gotta sing Santa Maria every time, like, that's shitty. But I don't know, I think we only watched this movie once, and this is one of those movies that I think merits like 2 watches at least, so you can fully understand it.
Right. And my take on the like singing the Ave Maria song, it's like, I think she had to sing that for the ability she was seeking, but it's like she doesn't have to do that for everything she's trying to do necessarily, if that makes sense.
Right.
And you probably don't have to do it every time, because you absorb the memories and abilities. So I think like after the initial absorption, you could probably just do the stuff again. But I love the way it's introduced to us without, like, before the concept is explained, we see alternate universe Wayman just like eat chapstick and then just start fighting people.
What a weird behavior. I'm gonna eat this chapstick and then I'm gonna beat the shit out of you.
Yeah. But it leads to like great opportunities for unique and fun action scenes, because like you have like the tension of a scene at one point is Evelyn trying to prevent 2 other people from sticking trophies up their asses. And like, they're working really hard to get those trophies in their asses. And it's like, it's a genuinely tense action scene, but it's also fucking hilarious because it ends with a guy just like spreading his legs and jumping on top of a trophy. And then they're fighting with them stuck up there the entire time. It's great.
Yeah. It's just, oh, that part had me just like crying laughing. It was just so funny. I mean, I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves too.
We are
fully explained the entire plot, so
we haven't talked about the emotional core of the story at all.
Well, there's just so much to talk about in this film because it's all so much fun. It's just surreal and absurd. So I mean, to just, I guess, continue the plot. Do you want to continue explaining it?
Sure. Yeah. It like the conflict begins really in the Alphaverse, where that version of Evelyn pushed her daughter Joy way too hard in this verse jumping and basically like fractured her mind. Basically, she experienced so many different realities to such a great extent that she basically believes everything is completely meaningless, nothing matters, and she becomes what the movie calls Jabu Tupaki. Um, and she is traveling across the multiverse, wreaking havoc, um, and searching for Evelyn for what reason we do not yet know. And yeah, and that intersects with our Evelyn sort of taking a lot of the things in her life for granted, and sort of glossing over them. Like she doesn't want to introduce Joy's girlfriend to her dad, because he's of a different generation and it would like scare him or whatever. And also she's taking her marriage for granted as Waymond is trying to like give her a wake up call through the divorce papers. So you sort of have Evelyn, who has a lot of good around her, but she is taking it for granted and not giving it the meaning it deserves, with her daughter, who thinks everything is meaningless. And that is our sort of operating principle going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we find out later, her daughter, or this version of her daughter, Jabu Tupake. Fun name to say. I like
Jabu
that.
Tupaki.
Jabu Tupaki. I love it. It's so much fun. And she eventually, it's revealed to us probably like, I don't know, at least two-thirds of the way through the film, that it's all because of this everything bagel. It's this
Everything on a bagel.
Everything, literally everything, like hopes and dreams, not just sesame seeds, but hopes and dreams, personal ads on Craigslist, every breed of dog, it's this amalgamation of everything that's in existence. And the bagel kind of represents this truth that nothing matters in the universe, and or even in the multiverse to of course. And we find out that Jabu's like, she's looking for her mom, for Evelyn, because she kind of wants a way out. Her way out right now is just go into the everything bagel, because why exist at all, and she was hoping that Evelyn could provide some alternative path that isn't self-destructive, and it builds to something instead. And that, I think that's beautiful, like too. And we'll absolutely continue to talk about this, but that everything bagel is just such a funny concept to me.
Yeah, and it's like, I think she created the bagel as like a vessel for meaninglessness. Basically, it's just like, it's not just everything bagel, it's everything on a bagel. It's the void that is a lack of meaning, basically. And she's looking for Evelyn because she thinks like she wants someone else to experience what she's going through and come to a conclusion, basically, was what I got. And it's like a unique being seeking to not be alone, pretty much. And the decision to make that being Evelyn's daughter, our protagonist's daughter, was very great. I think it really grounds what could have been a like universe spanning epic story and just puts it into this, like, it's about a mom and her daughter. That's what the movie is about. And it keeps it it's high stakes but personal stakes. And it was a good call. And the bagel is one hilarious because it's just a ridiculous concept. But yeah, it does bring up like the theme of, and this is why I talked about how like it's a multiverse movie, but it's really centered on like meaning and the human condition and what is all that, because like we're not operating on a multiverse as far as we know, but it's like the amount of information we consume every day from every corner of the world. It's like, it almost feels like we're consuming stuff from different universes, so it does raise that question, like, does nothing matter? What is meaning? What is all that? So I think we could talk about that a little bit as well. So does nothing matter, I guess, posits the movie.
It definitely poses that question. And I think it gives us a very clear answer by the end of the film, and that answer is no. The world has meaning, like the universe has meaning because humans create that meaning. Like, you know, I think the rocks in the film illustrate that point too pretty well, of like, this is just a universe where everything's rock. Like everyone
like,
is a rock.
It did, the conditions for life never happened or something, right? So it's just everything, just like, just be a rock. That was such a funny scene.
Yeah, that's really funny. But like, you know, even in this world where everything is permanent, it's just sitting there, it's not moving, they still moved her and the rock, like in their rock forms. They moved towards each other, they communicated with each other, and that's kind of what eventually drove her to like take the action of kind of tumbling off the cliff, and that she chased her daughter as the rock. But you know, it was that connection between the two of them. As human beings, they created meaning in that universe because they cared for each other, because you know, they had a relationship. And that I would argue that is ultimately what the film is telling us, is that meaning isn't just given, it's like we create it.
I agree, and that's kind of how I've thought about it a lot too. It's like, when some big life event happens to you, it's like, that didn't happen to teach you something. It didn't happen because, and sorry, like, I'm stomping on some people's beliefs here, but it's like, there was no divine will that made that happen. It's like, shit happened to you, and then you have to deal with that in whatever way you can, and then meaning is ascribed to it afterward based on how you've dealt with it and how it's affected your life. I think that's which I think is cool. It's like, the power is in our hands. But I think, like, if you zoom out enough, even on our own world, and you just see everything happening all over the place, seemingly disconnected, even though a lot of things are pretty connected to each other, but like thousands of seemingly disconnected events happening every second of every day. It's like, yeah, shit's meaningless in that, but it's like, meaning comes from day-to-day moments and experiences with the people you care about, which is what the characters decide to do at the end. It's like, I will experience this reality with you because those few moments of clarity that we will have together are what gives everything value and meaning, I think.
And well, yeah, and I think multiverse plots can create, you know, this challenging problem in question, which is like, yeah, what we've been talking about for the last 5 minutes of like, you know, if other versions of ourselves exist elsewhere, then why does it matter what I do? You know, I think Rick and Morty's kind of a good example of that. You know, Dylan and I are big Rick and Morty fans. We love it. It's such a funny show. But you know, in that show, it really plays with the idea of that multiverse and this infinite number of beings. Like the smallest decision can branch out into an infinite number of different realities and multiverses. And you know, I think that one episode when the concept is really introduced for the first time, where they, spoiler alert, they ruin the planet and
they fuck up the whole planet.
They have to jump into another world where they just died, and they're just kind of filling in the shoes of those two Rick and Mortys that just died. And you know, I think the realization, you could see it just dawn on Morty in that final scene of, he's just like, is this all that life is? Like, why does this fucking matter? You know?
Yeah, I think Rick and Morty, at least in the earlier seasons, is a very different thesis on the meaning in the multiverse. Whereas like in this, and I was writing a note and I just didn't finish it, but like every version of Evelyn is finding meaning in their own universe at the climax of this movie. And I love the part where like everyone starts to find that meaning, and then it goes wrong for a little bit, and then all of them turn it around. Like when they're going after the fucking raccoon, and then they trip, the guy trips, and then it's like, and then she just like, get on my shoulders and I'll run, and they make it happen. Like they make it work. Like, it's like, I think that's the thesis of the movie is, it's like you'll find meaning for a moment, and then the meaning will falter, and then you have to find it again and again and again, and you keep doing it because that's that's how you find meaning. It's like through determination. It's not a passive
Yeah.
experience.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, you can, I feel like that message also exists in the Douglas Adams series of books, you know, Life, the Universe, Everything.
Mhm.
Those books, you know, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, um, you know, in that book, like that first book, these people build this and really advanced computer because they need to know what is the meaning of life.
Yeah.
And the computer takes 100,000 years or something like that to calculate the answer. And when it finally gets to the answer, it's 42. And it's like,
oh, that's right. I didn't remember exactly what that's from. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. The answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42, according
Mhm.
to this gigantic computer. And then it's like, well, I didn't have enough data to support my answer. And then that's why they create the Earth. And the Earth is supposed to be that new version of the supercomputer to determine what the answer to life is.
Yeah.
But you know, it kind of like comes back to that of like 42 is a objective answer, but like meaning isn't objective. Meaning is
No.
subjective. Meaning means different things to different people. The meaning of life for my cat isn't the same meaning of life for me. Like he just wants to sleep all day. Mine's a little bit more complex, I think. Or I hope so.
You want to sleep like a little bit less than all day.
I just want to sleep all the time.
But yeah, and it's like, and meaning is derived from moments too, right?
Yes.
It's not like, and life is moments. I think that, because I think even in just a normal person's everyday life, it's like most of the time you're living, like you're not having meaningful experiences every day all the time. You're just kind of going through the drudgery of whatever it is you're supposed to do, and then you have like an amazing weekend or something, or just like something really special happens one day, or something really terrible happens one day, and then you're back to the routine after that. And theirs is the opposite of routine, I guess. It's like very janky and fractured, but same flow.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's just beautiful. It's there's so much to say about
really
it.
is.
And you know, in the chaos you find beauty. That's really what it is. And chaos has always existed. It's a primordial force, and life sprung forth from that. So if that's not chaotic and beautiful, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I think you just thematically hit the nail on the head of the movie. Like, in chaos you find beauty. Is that what?
Yeah.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, before we move on to like another subject too, I wanted to just briefly mention, you were talking about the internet earlier. So in my research for this episode, I also found that when they first started writing this script, it was going to be a commentary about online, you know, just the internet and like the expansion of the metaverse, and like we're creating all these new and exciting and interesting like ways to experience content. And that, yeah, that's terrifying. It's all virtual. It's none of it's in real life. And you know, it just gets complex and complicated. And you know, I'm glad that this script went through so many iterations too, and the meaning of it changed over time, because like if this movie was just a commentary on social media, it would not have been nearly as interesting as this one was.
Yeah, it does kind of remind me though, specifically the internet angle. It's like, one, fuck the metaverse, but two, it reminded me of from Bo Burnham's Inside, just a little bit of everything all of the time. You know, it's like the titles are very similar, one, and that is about sort of, that song is about like the fractured nature of our reality right now because of the internet. And this takes a similar concept and applies it to experiencing the multiverse through a fully fractured mind. Like, it's a, you know, like you can see how that would breed nihilism in someone, right? Yeah. If you're just experiencing brief moments of essentially other people's lives one after the other forever, like, yeah, it would fuck you up.
Yeah, of course it would. And I also wanted to say that, you know, I'm excited for Doctor Strange. that's gonna be a fun movie, and the new Spider-Man movie was fun too, and even Into the Spider-Verse, those like explorations in the multiverse, they're fun, and I'm looking forward to the next one. But I feel like those movies always have this problem of like, we have this big problem in the multiverse that we need to stop right now, and it always kind of culminates in this big monumental climax at the end of like, we're saving the multiverse and beating the bad guy. And I'm just kind of glad that this one didn't have that kind of conclusion. It was more just, fuck that, I'm just focusing on my family.
And it's like, you're right. I mean, the entire stake of the conflict is between Evelyn and Joy, and it's like Joy's like absorption of everything into the bagel. Like the movie doesn't feel the need to explain what the hell that would look like, really, because it doesn't matter. That's not the point. And they're not. It doesn't feel like they're saving the fabric of reality. It feels like Evelyn is trying to save her kid, which is much more meaningful.
Absolutely, and I'm 100% behind that kind of narrative. It's fun, and it's relatable.
Yeah.
Much more relatable than a wizard shooting aliens with magic to save the multiverse.
which is also very fun, but it's a different type of movie. And we have lots of those types of movies, so I'm glad we got this. And on the note you mentioned about it not being a battle to save the multiverse, I love that the climax here is not Evelyn beating the shit out of a bunch of people. It is that kind of, but it's more about her individually providing the meaning that is needed for every person she's facing on her way to save her daughter. And then like making the choice that her dad did not make for her when she was a kid, and saying like, I can't let you just leave. Like, I have to fight for you. And it's great. It's
much more emotionally impactful.
Yeah. And she makes a sacrifice to do that. Like, she's become a different type of being in pursuit of saving Joy, which is really like powerful.
Yeah, very powerful for sure.
But yeah, and one other element about the ending, and then we can just talk about like other fun stuff we like in it. But I like that there are consequences to Evelyn's decision. Like, we get our happy ending and it's happy, but when they're back at the IRS at the very end, like, she's getting pulled away by another reality, and it's like she's distracted because, like, she made a big choice. She willingly fractured her brain to be able to relate to her daughter again, and that's something that she will have to live with forever. And I like that the movie doesn't shy away from the fact that she made a very big choice, and it was the right choice, but it still like changed her life. So
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I guess I didn't really pick up on that as much at the end there. So I guess that's where the second rewatch comes into play for me. I want to rewatch this film because I think at the end I was just happy. I was like, I'm not really paying attention too much, right? I'm just happy this plot got resolved so well.
She just kind of drifts off for a minute, and then she asks Jamie Lee Curtis to repeat herself, and then that's the end.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So it's like she's just experiencing a different life for a moment, like she was doing at the beginning, but now we have a greater context as to what that feels like.
Yeah. And she's it also represents a good change, because at the start of the film she was like, yes, I'm listening, don't worry, but at the end she says, can you repeat that? So she's kind of acknowledging
that's a good point.
She's acknowledging, oh yeah, I should be more attentive, and like, that was, I need you to repeat that, please.
Yeah. And I guess surrendering a little bit of control too, just like, because she is very much like, I'm on a mission, I'm very focused on what I'm doing, and missing out on everything because of that. And now maybe because she is distracted by so many things, she will make more of an effort to be attentive when it matters.
Yeah, you never know. And I guess I gotta I'm all over the place, I'm sorry, but so during my research I also found out that because they spent so much time developing this concept, and these, like, the Daniels, they're really dedicated and they're passionate about this artistic direction, with
Mhm.
just their lives, being filmmakers and being storytellers. It's really inspiring too. Like, I encourage you to, like, listeners, please look them up. They're very interesting people.
Yeah.
But they actually uh, wrote a kind of companion book to this film called A Vast Pointless Gyration of Radioactive Rocks and Gas in Which You Happen to Occur. And from my understanding, they wrote this book for the benefit of the cast members and the people working on the film. It's not like you have to read this book to understand the film. It's more of like, they wanted to give the castmates and everyone working on the film a guide for the philosophical, scientific, and art-based research that they put together for this film. So everyone could kind of have this better idea of, like, oh, the multiverse, the nihilism, the empathy challenges, and all those other ideas in the film. And I just thought that was really neat. Like, these filmmakers are kind of going above and beyond with this film, of saying, this was really confusing, not just for us, but for our cast. We're going to write this book about it and provide it to you guys so you can have a better time with this film. So I thought that was just really, really neat.
Yeah, that is cool. You want to talk about some miscellaneous neat details, like raccoony?
I've been dying. I thought this was so funny.
So early on in the movie, Evelyn misremembers the name of the movie Ratatouille, in which, if you are not familiar with Ratatouille, it is about a rat who loves cooking and gourmet food, and a wannabe chef who's bad at cooking, and the rat lives on his head and steers him around by pulling his hair. Evelyn thinks it is a raccoon, and the movie is called Raccoony. And then it goes from there, if you want to elaborate on that.
Yes, so this was just a simple kind of joke that was, like, thrown in earlier in the film. And then later on in the film, in one of Evelyn's multiverse personalities, she is a hibachi chef, and one of the other chefs in the restaurant, she notices, has a little raccoon tail popping out from underneath his his chef's hat. And then one day she just takes off the hat and exposes him for being controlled by a raccoon.
But it, like, that, and it highlights one of the reasons this movie is so good too, because, like, that's a joke, but at the end, saving the raccoon from animal control is like a highly emotional, like, victory for that version of Evelyn and this other hibachi chef. Like, they overcome their differences and work together. That's the thing I meant earlier about them, like, running on their shoulders. Like, they do it together, and they provide meaning to that moment and save the talking raccoon, because it talks.
Yes, it talks, and it was voiced by none other than Randy Newman.
It's amazing.
It's so just absurd, and they did, it's just such a well executed job with this joke. Like, not only was it just like a throwaway joke in the first act of the film, then it was taken in midair, and they said, we're going to open that joke up and we're going to explore it, and then we're going to tie it into the film in an artistic, emotional way at the end. And it's just mwah.
Yeah,
raccoon chef's kiss.
And on that note of absurd things tied into emotional climax, it's like the hot dog finger reality.
Yeah,
completely ridiculous. The way it starts is the most overt reference in the film to 2001: A Space Odyssey, and the twist in this reality is the monkey with hot dog fingers kills the other monkey, starting a whole different train of evolution. But it's like, we follow hot dog finger Evelyn and hot dog finger Jamie Lee Curtis, who are in love with each other, and that like emotionally has a satisfying resolution, but also a plot resolution, because humanity in that reality evolved to deal with lack of fingers. They get really dexterous with their feet. One, attention to detail too. Jamie Lee Curtis's character has a wrist brace. In the hot dog reality, she has an ankle brace on her foot. But also Evelyn absorbing that ability allows her to like fight back and do stuff with her feet in the climax of the movie. It's great. Oh, and one thing I forgot to write down about recontextualizing what she has in the reality where she learns she doesn't go with Wayman to America and she stays and trains and becomes she becomes Michelle Yeoh basically, because like in that reality you see her at the Crazy Rich Asians premiere in one shot. But when she re-meets Wayman at the movie premiere or whatever, like I love how he talks about how he fights and how his optimism isn't just naivete, it's his way of dealing with the world. And it just like her hearing that recontextualizes how she thinks about her husband, who she didn't really respect before. And I thought that was really sweet. But
I thought that was super sweet too. And, you know, that certainly speaks to the adaptability of man. And even if we had hot dog fingers, we adapted and learned how to conquer our reality with that. And yeah, I thought that was very sweet too, and emotional. And the hot dog fingers bit was just that's like surrealist in like the best possible way. I thought it was just so
spectacular.
Yeah. And like how they're trying to navigate, like, how do you have like intimacy with these hot dog fingers? What does that look like? And they really kind of thought through that. And I'm glad that we explored that universe. There was, in my research, I found that there was also a deleted scene.
Okay.
So where it's actually a sentient spaghetti universe.
Okay.
And I would have loved to see that, but I understand that they probably cut that for time. They were like, one's a little too out there. We'll come back to that.
Yeah. I love the Rock universe though. Comedically brilliant, just silence, subtitles coming up on the screen. I love it. It's like, stop talking, just be a rock.
Yeah. And I like how they gave the Rocks like such personality too, like, you know, in the language and like kind of their movements. And then she got the little glue on eyes,
Google eyes
later. Like it's just so strange. And with the Rocks too, this might be stretching it a little bit, but you know, I feel like in this movie, the main characters live in these cages that they kind of built themselves, or they were built by other people or society. You know, Evelyn's living in this cage that she kind of built herself by moving away from her parents to America and purchasing this laundromat with this guy that she was in love with. And then her husband is kind of in this cage too, where he's in this marriage and he's not getting what he wants out of it, I suppose. And then even her daughter, you know, is living within this cage of her parents' expectations of her and of, you know, gender and sexuality norms, and you know, coming to terms with all that. It's we live in these cages, and I feel like the Rocks to a certain degree represent cages too. They're inanimate, they just sit there, and the fact that they could move in the film and kind of break free of those cages and speak to one another, I thought was liberating. And it was just kind of like a nice little, here's another motif to throw in the film, add on top of everything.
Yep. There are also pinatas at one point. Forgot about that.
I forgot about the pinatas. Pinatas.
But yeah, and there's also the element, it's not delved into as much, I don't think, but just about Evelyn actually accepting her daughter's sexuality. Because at the beginning, she's very much like, I'm fine with it, but don't tell granddad because it might hurt him or something. And then at the end, she's like, no, this is who she is, and you need to know this. And that's a good shift. But
it was beautiful. And I like how she came to that acceptance of not only herself, but her family too.
Also, just, we haven't talked about her enough. Jamie Lee Curtis is fucking hilarious in this.
Yeah. Yeah, she's great in it. And like, you know, I think they did a good job with like the makeup and the costume design too. Cause like when you first look at her, it kind of takes you a second to say, oh, that's Jamie Lee Curtis. Like she
Yeah.
just looks a little different than what you're expected to see.
She's much heavier in this than she actually is.
Yes. Yeah.
Jamie Lee Curtis
she
is
was
a very thin person.
Mhm. Yeah, and she was a good compliment to Evelyn in this
Mhm.
film. Like I think they were good kind of supporting characters for one another, not just like in the IRS and the main universes, but also in their hot dog universe. Like that
Yeah.
whole reality was very interesting.
And I just love the comedy that comes from when the like prime personality returns to a body, like with Jamie Lee Curtis specifically. Like she staples a piece of paper with the bagel to her forehead, and then later on she's like, what the hell did you staple a piece of paper to me? Like, because the personality just blacks out when they get taken over by the multiverse one, which adds some great comedy to, or comedy and sadness to, like with the dad, because he's like, he like opens the divorce papers in front of her or something, and then his body gets taken over or something, right? Like right after that. So they just like, they keep having these moments where they don't get to resolve their conversations because they're constantly getting taken over by each other. But
yeah, I thought that was very, very funny. And that whole like just sequence in the building, that the IRS building, was very well thought out. And yeah, they did an excellent job with that.
Yeah, and I think pretty much the entire movie takes place in just two locations: the IRS building and the laundromat. There are a couple extras, and the donut or the bagel palace, which is the aesthetic of the bagel palace is very funny. It's like so pristine and white and regal looking, and then there's just this giant black bagel just floating around,
just sucking everything in. It's like, what the hell? But yeah, I think you're mainly right. Yeah, there's two main locations: the IRS building and the laundromat. There's other ones kind of sparse throughout. You know, the film premiere and everything, but yeah, the main locations are those two places.
Yeah, amazing how much story can be told in just one or two buildings. But
I know, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, closing thoughts, like the emotional climax is very powerful. The line, I'm paraphrasing, but just like, I could be anywhere in any universe, but all I want is to be here with you, which she says to her daughter, is wonderful. And it like, it's in the line is in the trailer, but it adds so much more meaning when you understand the context of what that means in the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how much more I have to say about it, but I found this quote from Dan Kwan, one of the Daniels, that I thought was kind of fitting for the time and for this film, and I think it would be a kind of a good note to close on, especially since we have another multiverse film on the horizon, which we will be talking about in a future episode of Play, Pause, Rewind. But Kwan, in an interview, he had this great quote. It's, we should be looking to a forward-looking multiverse, because right now, this universe, the one we're in, is on a very scary path. And the multiverse is actually a really beautiful, important metaphor for right now, because we need to be looking at all possibilities, not just the one we think we're in. And we definitely shouldn't be looking backwards. I just thought that was beautiful, and it's apropos for the climate of the time.
Yeah, good choice of words. Yeah, no, that's a really beautiful sentiment that we should absolutely look to. But final recommendation, unless you were saying something else. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, looking to the horizon and moving into our final segment of the episode.
Yes.
That was all I was gonna say.
Oh, okay. We were on the same page. Let's talk about some other stuff we've watched or read or played or whatever. What have you been consuming these last 2 weeks?
Yeah, so still watching Moon Knight and some Halo from time to time. We'll be talking about at least Moon Knight down the horizon.
Yep.
Very concerned about the direction Halo's going. But I've also been reading this book. I just went to the bookstore in Boulder. I don't know if you've been there yet, but it's an amazing bookstore. It's
Okay.
on just on like that Pearl Street Mall up there in Boulder. It's really neat. But we were up there and I purchased Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman or Gaiman, one of the,
It's Gaiman.
however you pronounce it. Gaiman,
Neil
thank
Gaiman.
you.
Yep.
But I've been reading that, and it's actually a really cool book because it's just it's Neil's I guess takes on a lot of classic Norse mythology tales.
Cool.
There's not a lot of like, you know, stories that have been handed down through Norse mythology over the years. Like we have some, but it's incomplete, to be honest. And there's just not, you know, the same kind of carry through as there was for maybe, you know, the Bible or something like that. You
or
know,
Greek mythology.
we've lost a lot. Yeah, we've lost a lot of Norse mythology, and it's just really his retelling of a lot of these classic tales, setting the stage and describing these as best as he could, like trying to put himself into the shoes of like, you know, a classic I guess Scandinavian who was practicing the Norse faith way back in the day, and you know, just trying to really embody those tales. And it's really awesome so far. Very different from Marvel, obviously. The characters are similar but very much their own, and the stories are super cool. So I've been loving reading that. What about you, Dylan? What have you been up to?
Real quick before that, speaking of Marvel and Norse mythology, what do you think of the Thor Love and Thunder trailer that dropped this morning?
Oh, I do. One of the things I forgot to do today.
Oh no!
Watch that trailer.
It looks fun. I think you'll like. I think it's got good vibes. I've read the comic arc that it's based on. I think I've talked about it on the show before, but yeah, I won't say too much if you haven't watched the trailer. But that movie is coming out in like July, so it's kind of wild. We just now got a trailer for it. But
yeah,
what I've been other stuff I've been doing. I finished Elden Ring yesterday. Finally, 117-hour journey. I did it.
Wow.
And it was a very like beautiful and melancholic story. My first Souls game to complete, so that felt really good. And I beat the game's hardest optional boss, which felt really good on like attempt 25. Millennia, for anyone who's played Elden Ring, and they probably know, extremely difficult. But that's the point of these games, right? It's like super hard, and then you overcome it despite the odds. And I just want to talk about it real quick because it's such a cool concept. I think I mentioned it to you, but Miyazaki, when he came up with the multiplayer element of the Souls games, because the way it works is like you need help on a boss, you put a sign down, and then someone else who puts a sign down on their thing that says they can come help will show up in your game. They help you fight the boss, and then they leave. And the inspiration for that was apparently like if you get a flat tire on the side of the road and someone stops and helps you, that was where the idea for Souls multiplayer came from. It's like a person you've never met stops and helps you with something you need help with, and then they move on and you never see each other again. And also there's for the Millennia fight, there was this player who's become sort of a folk legend now. And the character's name is called Let Me Solo Her. And the player character, he wears no gear except the like starting underwear the character has and a pot on his head and dual wields katanas. And apparently he died to Millennia 224 times. And then when he finally beat her, he will just lay out his summon sign now and enter other players' games and kill her for them. And someone posted about it on Reddit, and like it got tens of thousands of upvotes. Tons of people have like encountered him. People have made statues and fan art of him, and he got an article in IGN. It's wild. But all that's to say, Elden Ring, it's an amazing game. It's one of the best. It and Breath of the Wild, I think I mentioned before, are the only two games that have really ever made me feel like I was on an adventure. So that's a good accomplishment. But also watching Moon Knight, watching Halo, the most recent episode of Moon Knight was really cool. I liked it a lot. I have not watched last week's Halo yet. I'm going to watch that tonight, I think. But I'm not a huge fan of the show so far.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it a little bit in the past few episodes, and yeah, it's not taking a great direction.
I
Might
think,
merit an episode at some point, but I don't
yeah,
know.
and I think that a lot of the things the show is focusing on, we've talked about this outside of the show, but like the Covenant are not really in it a whole lot, even though they're the main antagonists of Halo. And my suspicion is that it's budgetary, because every time the Covenant are on screen, you have to do CGI renderings of aliens or use your rendered models, which is expensive. But in my opinion, if you couldn't afford to do that, then maybe you shouldn't have made this.
Right?
Like,
You would think.
because I don't know. I'm being patient. Maybe it will get good. Maybe it won't. At the end of the day, who cares? But I also last night watched Licorice Pizza, the new Paul Thomas Anderson film. Paul Thomas Anderson's been a blind spot for me for a long time. This is a really good movie. It's really, really good. Lots of really long tracking shots, which I always love. The main romance of the movie is very uncomfortable because it's between a 25-year-old girl and a 15-year-old boy. But
yikes.
Yeah. But it's really good, and the performances are awesome. The characters are great. It has some fun cameos from name actors. Sean Penn's in there for a little bit. Bradley Cooper shows up for a couple scenes. But it's like, it's really a heartfelt story. And I've seen some comparisons to The Graduate, which I can kind of see in terms of the central relationship. But I would recommend it to everyone. It's great. But
cool. I'll have to check that out.
Be prepared for some like grooming behavior on screen.
Oh boy, that's fun.
But that's all for me, and we will see you guys back here in 2 weeks. We're going to talk about The Northman, I believe, the new Robert Eggers film.
The Northman.
Yes. From what I understand, it is an adaptation of the story that inspired Hamlet. So I'm interested to see how that pans out. But until then, where can people find you online, Niles?
People can follow me on Instagram at Niles Got No Styles. Dylan, what about you? Where can people find you online?
On Instagram at DylanD1026, on Twitter at D-Day Movies, on YouTube at D-Day Movies, on Twitch sometimes at D-Day_movies, and I believe that's all the places. But thank you all for watching and or listening. If you like the show and you're on YouTube, like it, comment, subscribe. If you're on audio, 5-star review. It's very helpful for us. And maybe one day we'll read them if they're funny enough. But yeah, we'll see you guys next episode for The Northman. Thanks for watching.
See you next time.
Bye.